One way of researching how people behave in urban environments is by tracking them and see how they move and interact with their surroundings. Time plays an important role as the main variable that defines the changes along the track positions. It's not too common to use time in a GIS, as most data is static, but of course it can be done. Alright, let's start here. We've got this map of Rotterdam and we've got a GPX track. In this case, I'm just downloading the track points, which has over 2000 features. So here we have the track points. Let's zoom into that a bit. And as you can see, it is already quite colorful. So let's change this a bit. Let's make the background a bit darker. We could even put it on grayscale so that the points really stand out. Now if you change the color, I would suggest you go for just plain red. That's a nice contrasting color. Don't use an outline on that, and maybe add a little extra draw effect, kind of an outer glow, so that it really stands out. That will do nicely. The next thing we do is that we have to make this dataset time aware. So we're going to the properties. Let's first have a look at the fields. You can see there's all kinds of field types. There's one date time field. It's called time. So if we go to the temporal tab, we'll just say this has a single field name with date and time, and it's called time. The event duration defines how long you keep things visible. So let's make that, for example, 30 seconds, half a minute, because when you're walking, there's every, let's say 10 seconds or so, there's probably a point here. Next, you go to the time temporal controller panel. You enable the temporal controller and you read the range from the actual data. So let's have a look what happens. You can see now that it goes from on one day, on the 30th of April 2011. It's quite an old data set this, but they still work. So let's set the step to 10 seconds. That'll be good. And let's run it. And then you see someone moving on black. And it is magical to watch. This is probably someone doing some shopping. He's walking, he or she is walking through all the shopping streets here. And you can see him stopping somewhat at some point and moving on again. The movement really adds to the mapping experience. You can make this a bit faster by, for example, speeding it up to 15 frames per second. Okay, but this is just one track. But what if you have multiple tracks and do this all the same way? That is interesting too. Sometimes you combine data sets, or you receive a combined data set that is in one big shapefile. In this case, we have one of those shapefiles, and I found out that the data types, the field types, were not exactly matching what we needed. So we have to work a bit with that data. Let's give that a go. So here I loaded the merged data set with all the combined GPS tracks. If we look at the fields here in this data set, you can see it is a shapefile and it just has string and integer type of fields. There is a date time, which is a string, and there's a date and a time, but they're all in text, so they're not date time data types. We have to work a bit on this. Let's identify one to see how it looks. Here you can see the date is just written down like this in a text string. Same with the time. The date time combines these two. Note that the year is just given in 2 digits. So what we could do is that we could export the data to a geo package. And while we're doing that, perhaps it's a good idea to also reproject the data to the Dutch coordinate system, because there's really no need to hang on to the WGS84. We're mapping it on a Dutch system anyway. So let's give that a go. I've made a new geo package. and the layer name I call reprojected tracks. And let's have a look at that. Next step is that we're going to add a field, a time field, to this one. So next thing we do is we add a field to this. As you can see, there is one called datetime already. So I just call the new one datetime with an underscore in the middle. I'll make a new one using the field calculator, call it datetime. The data type is a date and time, and I've already set this up before, so I'm going to show you this one. So what we do is we have the datetime field, the original datetime field, going to read the left 6 characters, then we add the number 20, and that is because we've already noted that the year is just given in 2 digits and we need to find the right century as well. And after that, with the right 11 characters that form time. Then you define the format in which it is given, and then it will automatically fill the new datetime field with the correct notation. As you can see, it has a datetime now, and this one is not a string, but it's a datetime field. Let's see how that appears. We'll just identify one of them. We can see it has a datetime field now, which is filled with a date in year, month, and day, and then hours, minutes, seconds. So yeah, this is a complete datetime field. What would happen if we would just run this data set again? We do have data in this time frame, so let's prepare that. First, of course, we have to save this data. So we stop editing, we save the changes, and then we make this data set time aware. So we make this one time aware by going again to the properties, and in the temporal tab we're changing this to a single field again, which is the datetime field. It's the only one that's available. We set this again to 30 seconds. Alright. And that means that it should be able to run now. And there you see all the GPS is moving. So let's change this again. Change the simple marker to a no pen. Give this one again a small halo, an outer glow. And then the magic, we're not going for a single symbol here. We're going to categorize this using the trip ID. Now if we start moving it, this turns into a really nice map with a lot of movement going on. Now of course it's kind of magic and it's fun to look at, but look at the practical purposes for your research project as well. This way you can show how a city is being used by people who just go on with their lives while they keep track of their movements. And if we zoom out a little more, for example to a more regional level, you could also see that this same data set also gives you a good insight into the relations between cities. So it really is skill independent as long as you have location and time combined into a data set. You could, for example, make your own transportation routes and add estimated travel times. There are different ways you can use time-aware data. So go ahead, pick your research project.